audio.
Just because you're strong or powerful doesn't necessarily mean you're good or technical.
Hey y'all, welcome back to The Struggle. I'm Ryan Devlin. I am your host, and I am here today with the one and only, the absolute ledge, Sonnie Trotter. I've been trying to get Sonnie on the show for 752 years, even though the podcast has been going for like 4 years. Is it 4 years now? I don't know. Anyway, since I started this podcast, I've been psyched to have this conversation. He is such an adventurous spirit. He is a dad. He has pushed rock climbing into all sorts of new territory over his long and storied career, and he's continuing to push the limits, which I'm really psyched about. For those out there, and I've heard from a lot of you who are, super busy climbers, we're just trying to perform as best as we can with the time we have. That is the chapter that Sonnie's in right now. And gone are the days of living off of 99-cent cans of tuna and doing nothing but climbing from dawn to dusk 7 days a week. Now he's a dad, he's a husband, he's a professional, and he's just trying to fit it all in. And fit it in he is. Oh, he shares all sorts of insights on how he's training, how he's resting, and how he's performing as he's trying to push himself to do the hardest things he's ever done. He's working on a 515A right now, a 9A plus, and he tells us about that and all the other things that he's working on in this conversation. You all know Sonnie. He put up the first free ascent of Cobra crack, an absolutely legendary, one of the hardest crack climbs in the world, the hardest at the time that he put it up in Squamish. He has and has earned a reputation for being one of the most talented, skilled, and boldest climbers out there, especially trad climbers, putting up really, really hard climbs on gear. He's incredibly technical, and he just cracks open his head and shares it all in this conversation. And I want you to make sure that you listen through to the end of this conversation, because as we get into that mental game chapter and beyond, Sonnie shares just such incredible, beautiful insights on climbing, family, work, and life. And I just loved every second of this conversation. I am so happy that you are here for it. And how about a quick little update from my world? Well, I just got back from a little getaway to the Red River Gorge. It was 100 degrees every day. Well, it was like the actual temperature was like in the mid 90s, but the heat index with all that humidity out there at the Red was well over 100. And so I got out, I climbed a single pitch of 5-4 climbing, not because I didn't want to do more. I would have loved to have done more, but I was just hanging up a top rope for some family friends. Then we hiked out, we did jump rock. I posted some stuff on Instagram if you want to take a look at that. And it was just wonderful. It was actually really nice to be out at the Red and not have climbing and performance be like the number one thing on my mind. So that was cool. I mean, we're just like straight up into summer vacation mode over here. So I'm doing all I can to stay fit at home and at the gym. I've got my kilter board panels. If you heard the last episode, you know that I'm putting in a kilter home wall in my basement, and I'm so psyched. I'm like staring at the panels in the holes, and I just haven't built the wall yet. I had a little bit of delay on the lumber that was coming in. I got some special lumber to build this wall. Anyway, I'll keep you posted on that. I'm going to put a video together because the build of this wall, because I have short ceilings in my basement, it's a really creative build to make it work and still make it adjustable while optimizing the amount of angle and footage that I can have on this wall. So really, really excited about that. Hitting the gym a lot and then trying to get outside when I can. I hope you're having fun outside. And speaking of outside, if you are able to get to Lander, Wyoming in just a couple of weeks here, oh my gosh, it's so close. The International Climbers Fest, ICF, is going on in mid-July. So July 10th through 13th is when I'll be there. I'm going to be hosting a live podcast at the kickoff party. It's a podcast of podcasters featuring friends of the show. Chris Kalous from A Normal Cast, Chris Hampton from Power Company, and Eric Hurst from Training for Climbing. The four of us are going to sit down at that kickoff party and just have some laughs and dive into all sorts of climbing nerdery. So live podcast at the kickoff party, and then I'm going to be around all weekend emceeing. So come by, say hi, let's get some climbs in, let's do the pull-up contest. We're going to be doing a big raffle. I'm talking about free shoes from Scarpa, gear from Petzl, Fizzy Vantage product, rhino skin stuff, force board, giving away a force board force gauge, so much more. So come on out to ICF. I'm going to put a link right there in your show notes so you can get tickets. If you do make it out there, please come by and say hi. All right, let's get into this thing right now with just one of the most thoughtful, kind, and talented climbers that this sport has seen. I'm talking about the one and only Sonnie Trotter. Dude, this has been a long time in the making. I feel like I've been trying to get you to sit down with me for years at this point in time, Sonnie. So thank you for finally finding the gap in the schedule.
Oh man, that's been a struggle, hasn't it? Trying to make it all happen. Yeah, it's just priorities, you know, you're like I was saying earlier, you have to remain flexible. You're like, I'd love to commit to this, but this thing might come up and this other thing, and then all of a sudden weeks and months fly by. So thank you for your patience too.
Of course. This is like a total gift to be able to have a conversation with you, man. You've just had such an incredible career, and I've loved following your journey throughout. I mean, you know, like the hard charging climbing, but also your family travels and like going around in a camper and, you know, just like hanging with the kids and doing the stuff at your gym there. All of that's just been really fun for me to follow along with as you've been, you know, going through this journey. And I think we're kind of similar ages. I'm 45. Is that you're in that neck of the woods?
45 turning 46 in November. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So we're there. We got similar kids. And it's interesting, man. So before I started this podcast, I was living out in California for a while. We moved to Kentucky because we wanted to be in Kentucky to raise our family. This is where my wife grew up. And we're like, let's just get out of LA. The traffic is heinous, the pollution, all this stuff. And I love Southern California. We just wanted kind of to intentionally live a little bit of a more, you know, kind of affordable, smaller, intentional life, at least while we were raising our kids. And so anyway, we moved to Kentucky, and that's when I started climbing at the Red, which was just a huge shift for me compared to the climbing that I was doing out west on granite and in Talkeets and Suicide Rocks and Joshua Tree and, you know, plugging gear and all that. And I move out here and it's like steep sport climbing. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And I was a 5'10" climber, just working on trying to climb my first 5'11s at the Red. And I sent you a message on Instagram. You were like opening it up for questions or something like that. And so I had like climbed like a handful of 5'11s, and I think I was maybe 38 or something like that at the time. And I said, hey, I want to climb my first 512 by the time I'm 40. You know, what do you think? And you like sent me back a really nice supportive message. And you were like, you know, time and effort, you just got to like put in the work. You're not that far off. You can totally do it. And it was just like a really supportive message. And it got me hyped. And so I set the goal, and then I ended up hitting it. And I just climbed my first 513 like a few months ago. So I'm still chugging along.
Oh, that's incredible. What a great story.
Thanks, dude.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I'm glad that I was able to get back to you and some words of encouragement, but it sounds like you just did the work on your own anyway and got there. So that's a great story. Yeah. Congrats. So you've been living in Kentucky for how long now? Like how long has the Red been home?
Been 8 years now.
Okay. Amazing. Yeah. I love Kentucky, right? It was probably like my first real road trip was the Red River Gorge in 96.
Sick. Have you been back since?
Yeah, a few times. Like I went back twice a year for 96. I went twice in 97, twice in 98, once in 99, and then I've been back every 5 or 6 years ever since. So I've seen the changes and the progression. I mean, in 96, we went on a long weekend. I think it was April, spring long weekend. I can't remember. It was probably Easter, actually, now come to think of it. And Miguel's had I think there was 8 tents. Right. And, you know, the Sugar Shack was still there, or the Love Shack was still there.
Yeah, the Love Shack.
Yeah.
Before it burned down.
Totally. It was just
before Miguel burned it down.
Such a different scene. And I go there now and there's like thousands of people. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah. It's cool. Yeah. I was out there just a couple days ago. I mean, it was just tent city. And I've only been climbing there for 7 or 8 years now. And it's grown a lot since I've been there. But there's still, it's nowhere near like hitting its capacity. I mean, you probably have seen that the coalition just acquired through this big partnership, like this massive amount. It's basically doubling the amount of land that's going to be accessible for climbers. And so there's going to be another few thousand routes that'll be bolted here over the next 5 or 10 years. So it's just, you know, there's 3 more mother loads out there just waiting to be climbed, dude.
Wow. So they've like mapped this area. They know where the rock is. They know how much there is, and they've acquired this land, and it's just starting now. Like
just starting. Like I just got pictures from Eric Hurst. He was out there with his son, Jonathan, and they just put up a bunch of what seemed to be super high quality 13 plus, 14 minus in this new crag called the Venue that looks like the Lode. I mean, it's just this like never ending epic cave that just goes out and just forever. And you're like, oh my God, there's another one of those. And then there's more, you know, it's really wild. So
I'm sure
the Red is calling, my man. Come on out.
we talk about it every couple of months. It comes up like, how are we going to do it? Where, when, I think October, November is like my favorite season there by far. It's just, the kids are in school now. We're just trying to figure out. And it's also like October, November is also a really good like valley season.
Yeah.
And those are like two very powerful draws. And, one's a little closer, one's a little farther and a little more complicated, but we will make it happen. I think the year is actually, I know it's kind of weird to say this because it's 2025, but we're already booked for this fall for a Yosemite trip actually. And then next year's a possibility actually, 2026. Yeah, fall of 2026, because we're also we're starting to plan like 18, 24 months out, maybe even more. We've had Spain 2027 on the list for like 3 years.
Yeah, dude. That's like necessary now. Gone are the days where you could just be like, well, let's just like go, now it's like kids, oh, well, we got a dance recital here and we got this competition and the school thing. And you just have to, now we're like looking at like decades ahead. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And, factoring in like family visits and stuff, right? Like, like I want to, like when I see my parents or, the kids see their grandparents, like that has to be at the beginning of a trip. And then we go to Spain and then maybe we go visit my wife's parents on the, because you have to it's this crazy spreadsheet.
Yeah, man. Well, it's not going anywhere. And by the time you get out here, there will be even more routes. From what I've seen and what I've heard from others who have hiked around, some like really splitter crack climbs, like single pitch crack climbs through roofs, hard stuff, maybe, kind of 14 minus, 13 plus crack climbs. So I think Tom Randall's going to come out this fall, and I've been all over the Honolds to come out. I think I've convinced Sonnie to come out because like it's great for the kids. There are waterfalls and hikes and the approaches are beautiful. And Alex is like a little bit of a curmudgeon because he likes the desert so much, but we might get them out here one of these days. Maybe we could, that'll be something we can coordinate. If you figure out when you can come, maybe we can get some others to come along as well.
Oh, that sounds awesome, actually. I know that my wife more easily gets on board places she hasn't been when there's other families and kids involved.
Totally.
Right? That's the one thing that she's like always apprehensive about. I'm like, let's go on this trip. And she's like, well, how, like the logistics of it all, right? And making sure that it's not like difficult in any way, right? The more families and friends, the easier that whole juggling act is.
For sure.
Becomes. And I think like once she sees it, she'll see how powerful that area of the world is. It's so pretty. And it's just so unique, in it, the roots and stuff. Like, I think she would just love it because she's a small climber. She's 5 feet tall. And so for her to have these like little intermediates everywhere and lots of different foothold options, I think she would just really enjoy it. On granite, oftentimes like, a 5'11" is a 5'11" because there's a foothold here and there's like another foothold
right
4 feet away. So, the red's amazing that way. It can really suit a lot of different boxes. And so I think she's going to love it. I'm going to pencil it in right now, fall 2026.
Yeah, mentally make that note. And for that same reason, it's great for the kids because like I'll go out there with my daughter and I got her on this 10A the other day and she climbed it. And I was like, whoa, because she hadn't climbed anything that hard. And she was just like finding all these little intermediates and all these little pockets that were like jugs for her. And she climbed it totally different than me, of course. But everything was a hold. So yeah, man, well, cool. It'll be great to have you out here. And it's definitely for those who are parents who are listening right now, they get this. And for those who maybe are thinking about being parents, it's almost counterintuitive that things like you would think adding more kids to the mix would make it harder, but it's actually so much easier. The hardest thing is just when you're just with your kids, but then like you bring more kids in, then like they're just off exploring and stomping and turning over rocks and splashing in the creek. And, you can get your pitches in. It's like you still have to keep an eye on them, of course, but my kids are like 10 times less needy as long as there's other kids around, I don't know if that's the case with you as well.
Oh, yeah. I think all kids, they just get into their world, and they're just so engaged. But when it's just Lydia and I being adults, they go in and out of that world. But when it's like, there's like 6 of them, they're just all in.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, there's a million things that I want to talk about, but I'd like to try to stick a little bit to the format here from the struggle and go through and explore training, nutrition, tactics, mental game, and all this good stuff through the lens of struggle. And so I guess, Sonnie, I'll open it up first and ask you about struggle in general. And as a rock climber through the lens of climbing, what's your relationship with struggle?
Well, wow, what an opening question.
Just go right at
My
it.
relationship with struggle. The first thing that comes to my mind anyway, when I look back at my history, has been like injuries. I
Yep.
think, ever since I was a teenager, I've had finger problems, like finger injuries. And that's a struggle. And it's a struggle mostly because I wanted to, and I still want to climb all the time. And, I remember talking to Barry Blanchard. He's an alpinist who lives in town, rock climber, alpinist. And he always said he hated the downtime when he was on expeditions and trips. He loathed it. He wanted to be in the mountains all the time, every day, but your body just can't do it. And I kind of feel like that with my climbing life. It's like, I wish I could. I want to climb 7 days a week, to be honest. And I just can't. So if my first struggle, like first thought from that question, it would be the body's limitations.
Yeah. What the mind and the heart want, the body can't quite follow. And was that, you said those injuries, stem back, going back decades now and into your early career even. Mm-hmm. Were you able to essentially just climb every single day in those earlier days, and you were getting like overuse injuries, but you'd climb through them? Or have you always had to discipline yourself with taking more rest than maybe you would want to do?
I think I've been actually pretty responsible with injuries. I know climbers joke that they would just put tape all over their hand and have this huge lump. But I was actually, as soon as I felt pain, I actually was one of the first people to like just back off. I wanted to push through, and of course I did. But my goal since I was like 16 was to climb forever. And so I knew that if I did any more damage, like I think maybe, I don't know where it came from, but I've always had like a long-term perspective, even as a teenager in my 20s with climbing. I always knew that I wanted to climb till my 50s, 60s, and 70s, and whatever. And so whenever I had an injury, I would back off, and then I would test it and let pain be my guide. And I've taken months off without climbing at all because I just wanted it to heal thoroughly. And so I think that's actually been probably, looking back, it's probably been pretty good strategy. But those months off are torturous.
Yeah, no doubt.
You kind of have to like weigh it out. But now here I am, 45, and I'm, I've had a few finger injuries this winter actually, which were frustrating, but I let them heal, and I just had one of the best training sessions I've had in 6 months, just like yesterday or 2 days ago. So, you kind of weigh it out, like the short term versus the long term. I think it's a really important question for everyone to ask themselves.
Yeah, that's really interesting. This dovetails well into the first chapter here that we'd like to focus on, which is training. And so we'll kind of geek out, and I'd love to hear about that fantastic training session you just had. But peeling back a little bit on your statement there, your perspective of always knowing that you wanted to climb well into older age, 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, I see people out at the crag that are in their 60s. I climb with Eric Hurst all the time, who's 61. And he just, climbs circles around me and a lot of the younger people who are at the crag. And I find that really exciting and motivating. However, when you're 20, you kind of are just thinking you're not thinking about 60 usually. You're thinking like, oh, I'm indestructible and I just want a hard charge and I want to climb the hardest 14s in the world or whatever. I'm putting words in your mouth, not mine. I wasn't even climbing when I was in my 20s. I wish I had discovered climbing at a younger age. But the point is, you've had this perspective for much longer than I think maybe many people who are listening right now who might be in their 20s. They're thinking about performing right now and how can I push my body to its limits right now, and maybe not thinking about what are the implications of this, on the sport that I love for when I'm 50 or 60. And so I'm curious now, as you were able to look back and reflect, what are some key takeaways for those of us who do want to climb and enjoy this sport without any sort of limitations on age?
It's a really hard question to answer because everybody is different and everybody responds differently to different load types throughout their career. Some people just are very resilient in some ways, and then maybe more fragile in other ways, or they'll have shoulder problems but never have a finger injury, or they'll have finger problems. And so it's a very it is, maybe it's a get out of jail free card, but it's like everybody has to really tune into themselves. At the end of the day, I highly recommend that, because if you try to take everybody else's advice and apply that to yourself, without checking into yourself first and foremost, then I think that's the recipe for a kind of a dangerous path. And sort of to go in that a little bit deeper, like I think the reason that I would take time off is because I knew people who went hard for 18 months in the first 18 months or 2 years of their climbing life, and they got wrecked. And I know people who quit climbing because it became too painful for them. And I think that I've learned to like model pretty early. Like I was 16 looking at 19-year-olds who were like, you know, couldn't do things already because they had pushed too hard too fast.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as much as I wanted to see how hard I could push my body, I always had that in the back of my brain being like, I do not want to like be forced to not climb, you know? So every time I had an injury, I backed off, I guess. And it's frustrating as hell, and it's emotionally frustrating. And I was grumpy. Like when I would injure myself as a teenager, you know, I'd be very grumpy. I don't even know how I would handle it today with Instagram and YouTube, because back then, if I got injured, all I had was my collection of magazines to like look at,
right,
you know, and be like, oh, like Lynn Hill, like, you know, on the nose and stuff. Like I just had like these images that I'd looked at 100 times. But now with Instagram and this like new wave of, you know, it just feels like every 20-year-old kid can climb V17 now. And you're like, and right, it's awesome. Like it's totally awesome. But I feel like I would be so tortured watching reel after reel of people having fun in these amazing places. And I'm stuck in, you know, suburbia nursing a finger injury or something. It would be really frustrating. So I wonder in a way if it's harder now on people. I don't know. It's just a weird question to ask, but I wonder.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, the FOMO is definitely seems like it can be more acute now than before. It used to just be like your own group. So it's like, oh, my friends are getting out to the crag and I'm injured. I'm, you know, feeling sorry for myself. But then, yeah, when you're seeing the whole world out there just doing like epic shit all the time while you're nursing something, it can be hard. But then there are things that can be done when we're healthy that hopefully prevent injury, or at least, you know, reduce or mitigate the chances of injuries that would take us away. And you're just talking about having like a really great training session, and I'm assuming you've learned a lot about yourself over the decades now. So how are you training now? And maybe compare it to like how you used to train. Like what's working for you now to keep you healthy, keep you strong, and, you know, get you out there performing, at which you're still performing at an incredibly high level. I think we all know about the Gentleman's Race to 9A and Spirit Quest, and I'll talk more about that, I'm sure, in a little bit here. But, you know, you're performing probably, you know, better than most people your age, and you're busier than ever, and you're trying to stay healthy. And so what does your training look like now?
Yeah, so now, I mean, I think I'm at an age where, because I can't recover as fast, and because I can't climb 5 days a week, or, you know, maybe sometimes even 3, sometimes I get two training sessions a week and then I recover. So because of that, I feel that I have to be very specific about what my goal is. Because when you're 16, 19, 25, maybe even like 30, you can just climb 4 or 5 days a week and do a variety of things. You can campus, you can jump to holds, you can moonboard, you can, you know, then do routes another day and trash yourself on getting super pumped. And you can do all of it, I feel like. But I think I've realized that I have to be more specific with what my goals are. So, for example, a couple of my personal projects are rope climbing in the next year. And I can't think of one campus move that I have to do on any of them. Like I can't think of one move where I have to cut my feet loose and jump to a crimp, you know? So I'm like, is moonboarding actually going to help me, or is campus training actually going to help me achieve my goal? And so I think I'm just getting like really dialed in to like simulating what my goals are, and then how do I prepare for them 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months in advance.
Yeah.
So
I dig that. That's really good specific perspective and advice there. I feel like knowing what you want to do and then tailoring training around that makes a lot of sense, although many of us can be enticed by the shiny object and just want to do the training modality that our friends are doing or that we just saw online or whatever the case may be. And so for you,
right,
let's continue that example forward for a little bit if we could. If your goals are sport climbing or route climbing, I'm not sure if it's you're plugging gear or not, whatever, but you know, on a rope, as you said, rope climbing, and it's more static, what does your training look like? Do you have specific routes in mind? Are you training specific like movement, or is it just more general than that?
Well, to be fully transparent, I'm actually training right now for an extension of a climb that I've already done that I did last year. And yeah, so young phenom from California named Connor Herson came up, spent a couple summers in Squamish.
The man.
And yeah, he basically went through every 514 we have in the valley and started adding
515 as well, I think.
Well, that's right. And so that's actually the route I have in my sights. He put up a 15A last year, really heroic effort. I mean, you know, he started trying it the season before, came back last year to finish it off. And, you know, it's incredible. But basically my fitness has to be higher than I think I've ever had it, but in a very specific way. Like you said, it's almost a very static way. Like there's a couple of dead point moves, but there's nothing that's like, you know, full blown massive distances. The dead points come from like really awful feet. So, you know, you feel like if you can't keep tension throughout your whole body, your feet just pop and then it becomes like an impossible move. But if you can keep the tension and you're from tip to tip, you can do it in a dead point way. So it's aggressive climbing, but it's also precision climbing. So how does that relate to my training? Well, essentially what I've done is I haven't recreated the route in the sense of like movements, but what I do, and I learned this from Eric Horst actually, from his original book about visualization. So last year when I was doing this 9A challenge, I only had maybe 10 or 12 days on the route last spring, but spread out over like 3.5 months or 3 months or something like that.
Right.
Beginning of April to June 10th is when I sent it. So when I would come home for 2 weeks, I was just training, but I would spend maybe half an hour every day visualizing it. And so I never forgot the sensation of that movement, because I'd literally just like lay in bed in the morning and, you know, I'd run through a little movie quickly in my head. I even have this little rock actually that I would carry around from the crag, and I would like dig my fingers into the granite to keep like a neurological connection so that when I was visualizing, I could pretend that I was there. So it almost, in a sense, I could train.
That's cool.
And be there at the same time. Because if you only try that one route, I don't know if you saw Connor's picture, but you just trash your skin. And right. And so it becomes, at a certain point, it actually becomes like you decline in your attempts because your skin is so bruised. And so I went one step further. I started thinking about like how many actual full crimp moves are there. And in the route that I did, there's about like, you know, I had to get to about between 50 to 70 full crimp moves in a burn.
Wow.
And in this one, the whole route is exactly 110 moves to do the 15A. And so I've got to like basically like increase my threshold by like another 40% on top of what I could do last year. So I'm getting very like specific. And so what I'm doing now is I'm literally, if I want 2 burns a day at 110 moves of like 99% crimping, I just have to recreate that in my training. And that's what I do. It's boring as hell, but I do ladders on the campus board with feet on.
Right.
Yep. I put my feet on because it's not about ultimate power. It is about stamina. I know that I'm strong enough to do every move. There's no move harder than like a V7 or V8, but I have to be able to do 110 of them.
Right.
So, and so at this point, it literally just comes down to resistance training. How can I push my fingers to contract, release, contract 55 times on each hand without loss of enthusiasm or power?
Yeah, man.
You know?
I love the specificity of that, and like to really take it down 10 notches and just share one little personal anecdote. I did a similar thing when I was projecting this 13A, which for me was my 15A. It was my mega proj, and went over the course of a few seasons, and Eric was helping me out with it. And then I have all these conversations with like the best climbers and coaches in the world, which is just such a gift. And out of one of the conversations, it was with Dr. Tyler Nelson. He recommended essentially doing what you're saying, count the moves, divide it by 2, so you know how many moves per hand. And for me, it was 26 moves per hand. And I was recreating it using like a force gauge, I've got like a force board, whatever, but I was just basically doing like block lifts at 60% of my max. And so like I got really specific and analytical about it. I basically like would test my max strength. I would take 60% of that and I would say, can I do 26 of these in a row? And when I can get there, I know that I'm fit enough to be able to do this route. And then it might just be a matter of, conditions or some technique or a little bit of a recovery on kind of a marginal rest or whatever. And so it was very specific, and I love that. Like, I really respond to that. It kind of makes the training a little less, I mean, to your point, it's still mundane in a sense, but you know you're very specifically working towards a thing. And so when I got to 20, I was like, okay, you know, and then you get to 25 and 26, and I'm like, oh shit, like I'm within striking distance here, which was really cool. And I couldn't get out to the project very much. So that was like the thing that kept me psyched. I wasn't carrying around a piece of the crag with me though, Sonny. Maybe I would have sent sooner had I brought home a piece of the crag.
It's funny, I didn't do it initially to hold it. I just did it to have it on my desk as I was working, you know, just to like not lose because it's so easy to lose focus and be like, oh, well, now I'm being distracted by all this other stuff. It's just so easy. And so did it initially to like keep focused. And then I started like playing with it when I would be like having a work meeting or something. I would just start like biting into the sharp edges. And I was like, you know, this is actually it's really good to have. I'll put it back one day, I promise. It's still in good shape.
That's great. No, you just like, you need to like loop some cordelette around it, and you can do some block lifts with it. You know, you can get like really in touch with it. And actually, speaking of that, you touched on skin. I did see the photos that Connor posted. I mean, that thing looked, first of all, the route looks absolutely incredible. And
it is, yeah.
I saw that you all spent some time out there, and it brings to memory, you'll have to correct me if I'm misremembering this, but Cobra Crack, which I mean, like legendary first free ascent by yours truly there, that seemed like it was a really brutal route on the skin as well. If I recall reading something like, you know, I don't know, it was an article or something, you know, back in the day that you had to really limit your attempts on the route because just it was so hard on the skin. And so what do you do about that? I mean, I mostly climb on sandstone out here, and I think it's a little bit, it can be tough, but anytime I get out on granite, just find myself just getting absolutely trashed. And so is there a way to improve your skin so you do get more quality sessions, or do you just have to be incredibly disciplined about how much you're like gripping down on that stuff?
Yeah, I think for me, it came down to quality attempts as opposed to quantity, for sure. Mm-hmm. So I would have more rest in between attempts because I knew that I had, you know, whatever, 5, 10, 15, depending on the route, good attempts in me in a session. So I try to focus on more quality sessions. It's really popular right now for people to get into like that anti-hydral stuff. Like
right.
I see people with like mega calluses that you should have like on the palm of, like on the you know, the sort of second, third knuckles of your hand, but they have it like on their tips. Like it is crazy how strong that skin has become, but it's almost, to me, would almost feel like like too hard to dig into crystals. But
yeah,
I'm not sure. Like it seems to work for a lot of people. I've never tried anything like that. I've always been the person where I was like, if I'm 3 layers from splitting, I tape, and then if I can't do the move, I walk away, and I will come back with fresh skin. So it's similar to how I approach finger injuries or shoulders. I will just walk away. And what I used to do in my 20s when I was climbing a lot, is I would vary the style on granite. So one day it would be finger cracks, the next day it'd be boulders where my tips actually got trashed. Like my fingertips, the pad itself never really got split on Cobra. It was the knuckles. You'd have these huge gobies, these flappers that could just rip off. So I toughened up my skin methodically, and then I would also train on wooden edges when I was done. So even though my body wasn't tired, but my skin, I would hit a woody with not plastic or resin. I would just hit wooden holds, and I would continue my training session for another hour at the end of the day. Because if you just do climbing based on skin and not like full fatigue, I think you're limiting your, you know, especially in your 20s or 30s, you know. Now, like I could do a burn and a half on Connor's route, and then not only is my skin trashed, but my body's trashed too. So it's kind of gotten to a point where it kind of matches. But yeah, I just let pain and, you know, visually I look at it and I'm like, there's still chunks missing. Just let it grow back, and I will have a much happier session. I am much more fulfilled when I can climb at my limit rather than climbing at 80 or 90% and pushing through an injury or, you know, skin issues. So I'd rather just take a week off and let it heal completely and then come back with like 100% enthusiasm than just push through 2 weeks of shitty skin and be like at 80 or 90% the whole time. That would suck for me.
Hey, I'm really psyched to say that Arc'teryx has come aboard to support me and the podcast, and I just couldn't be more excited because Arc'teryx, as I'm sure you know, is just one of the most well-regarded, highest-performing brands in the outdoor space, and that is evidenced by their athlete team, many of whom we've had on the show here. Friends of the show, Jonathan Segrist, Drew Ruana, Amity Warm, Jordan Cannon, so many more out there are crushing it in Arc'teryx gear. They take really, really good care of their athlete team, and they take the best care of me and everybody else who wears Arc'teryx gear because this stuff holds up. Right now, this is a podcast, so you can't see what I'm wearing, but I am wearing the Delta Half Zip pullover. It's bright orange. I'm sure you've seen me in my interviews and climbing in this thing. It is crazy soft. It's crazy lightweight. And I'm also loving right now, kind of in these spring, summer temperatures where we're going to be getting some rain if I'm hiking into the trails or I'm going for a little adventure with my family, the Gamma lightweight hoodie. It's super, super soft. It's super comfortable. It's got a hood with a little visor on it. It packs really small. Everything that Arc'teryx makes is just of the highest quality. It lasts forever. They've been doing it for over 35 years. They love climbing, and I love them. You can learn more over at their website. You can hit that link in the show notes or swing over to thestruggleclimbingshow.com/Arc'teryx. All right, y'all, just want to take a quick second here to tell you how I'm staying healthy and taking care of myself as I'm now pushing my body to the hardest limits I've ever pushed it as a rock climber. And the way that I'm fueling these gains that I'm working so hard to get is with PhysiVantage Nutrition. You all know PhysiVantage. They've been a sponsor of the show since the very first episode, and I've been a paying customer of PhysiVantage since long before there was ever a podcast. And why is that, Ryan? Why am I buying PhysiVantage products? Well, it's because they work. They're designed by climbers for climbers to help us climb our best. Every single day, I'm taking their supercharged collagen before I do like a little light fingerboard workout, like the Abra hangs that I've talked about here on this show, or before I go climbing or go to the gym. And I'm also fueling up either before or after a workout with one of their protein powders. It's like my sweet treat that I have. And the most important thing, as I mentioned, is that it works. Most coaches and doctors and dietitians are going to tell you that you should probably take in about a gram of protein per body weight every single day if you're an athlete and you're trying to fuel your gains. So for me, 155 grams of protein is a lot of protein in a day. And I love a whole foods diet, but I have to supplement in order to hit that goal. And I do it by using PhysiVantage. Hit that link right there in your show notes and you'll get 15% off pretty much everything over at the PhysiVantage store, or use code STRUGGLE15 at checkout to get that discount, and let's get after it. Nutrition is the next chapter in the struggle format here, and we're talking about recovery, we're talking about skin, we're talking about trying to, put in quality efforts. Nutrition can come into play and a lot of that. And so I'm curious from your perspective if there's been any struggles in the nutrition aspect of your climbing, and then we can maybe take a look at what's been working for you.
I haven't struggled with nutrition. I have eaten a lot of crap in my life and garbage. I do have a sweet tooth. I would say I'm very disciplined with food. Yeah, especially in my 20s, late teens, early 20s, I was just eating peanut butter and jam sandwiches every day because I just had to live off of, I would eat like 99-cent canned tuna and craft dinner for dinner, peanut butter sandwiches, and potatoes and eggs in the morning that I would just, buy for a bag of potatoes for,
right.
just like $2. Dirt cheap. And I would live off of that. That was my diet for years because, I just needed the carbs. I didn't really care about, and I didn't have any money. So I was very, very low budget carbs. And then when I met my wife, I was 26 when we started dating, and I just couldn't believe the investment she would put into eating organic. Like she's never eaten crap a day in her life. When we traveled a lot, and when you travel, you don't always get the best food quality, or like you just like, I just need to eat something or I'm gonna lose my cool here. She would just not eat. She was like, I would rather fast for like a day than eat that. It's so
wild.
Yeah. So she would just like wait, and then we'd get to wherever we're going, and then she'd source good food. And so she's really shifted my perspective on that. And then just eating together, she's like elevated my eating habits by 1,000. It's like, she's wonderful. She actually makes a salad every day. I never even thought of eating vegetables before before dating her.
That's great. So you're in a much better place now than you were then with regard to the quality of the food. And then,
Yes.
what about like on a climb day or for recovery or just things? I mean, look, fellow sweet tooth guy here. So we could probably, go down a bit of a road on what we like to throw in the crag bag. But, what are the staples for you? Or just what are you finding that's working to help support your training and your performance?
I'll tell you a quick story just to show you the difference of my life today. When I was 22, for example, I would go to the crag and I would forget to pack food, right? Like food was never on my radar.
Right.
It was just like, I'm hungry, I need to eat. And that was it. And I remember one day we were heading to a place called Horn Lake on Vancouver Island. And we went to a grocery store, right? I was like, I forgot to pack anything. They're like, okay, let's all go to this grocery store. We'll get Sonnie some food. And I felt like in a rush. I felt like I was holding up the crew. And so the first thing I saw was like a full-sized blueberry pie. And I just bought that and put it in my backpack. And
hey, you got your fruit, you got your carbs, I mean, there's probably eggs in that crust or something.
gotta be something, right? There's a little bit of butter probably.
That actually sounds delicious, dude.
I just ate an entire blueberry pie at the Craig. And nowadays, like, my wife wakes up in the morning and she's like, what do you want to have for dinner? Like, she plans meals out, sometimes even days in advance. I would never have thought to do that before. So how it's changed is we definitely am aware of my sugar cravings, and I'm more disciplined now at 45 than I've ever been in my life. I still eat a ton of chocolate. I love chocolate, but I do a lot more protein. My wife and I cook a lot more vegetables, and I drink a lot more water than I've ever used to, for sure. I'm starting to experiment with collagen. I've been taking like a collagen drink that's been helping. And then on really big days in the mountains, she's got me drinking like electrolytes, which I never used to do before. It was just water and a bag of chips. And now it's like, I don't know the brand, but she'll get me on electrolytes and things like that. And I have to say that I've also been, I have been very lucky with the fact that no matter what I've eaten in the past, my weight never fluctuated that much. I've always been fairly lean, or at least just super active. Like, I think maybe my activity level has just, been able to offset what I was eating. And so my weight, like even at my heaviest, I think the heaviest I ever got was when I was trying to lift weights can't remember, I must have been like 19 or 20. I wanted to feel strong. And so I started incorporating lifting weights with all my climbing days. I would climb and then lift weights. And I think I got up to like 170. And when I had malaria from traveling to India, I was down to like 159 from puking for 3 weeks,
Right.
Or 2 weeks or whatever it was, and not being able to eat. My cheeks were all sunk in, and I think I got down to 159. So those are like my two extremes. But in terms of longevity, I realized that eating chocolate and blueberry pie is not going to be helpful when I'm 50, 60, and so on. So thank God my wife keeps me in check. And I think I just focus on eating a balanced diet and getting higher protein than ever before.
Shout out to the partners in our lives that are making us take care of ourselves. My wife says that she's like the water police because she's just constantly reminding me and the kids. It's like, it's become her mission in life to make sure people are hydrated. I mean, and she takes it seriously. Like just walking down the street, total strangers, like, have you had your water today? I mean, she is militant about this water. And so I think I'm like consuming much more water now than I ever have, which is never a bad thing.
Oh no, that's one incredible thing to be diligent about. I know that I perform better in everyday life when I drink more water. I have this one story in Squamish when, this rat tat group of climbers, this is all pre-kids, pre-serious relationships, pre-careers. We were in our 20s, and we would just party and climb because Squamish was just full of young people and who just wanted to live the dirtbag climbing life. And there was this one guy who's an incredibly talented athlete, just a very gifted climber, and among other things. And he could drink heavier than everybody else, right? Like, he was not a big person, but he could just consume so much. And he'd have his moments of, blacking out, probably couldn't remember what was going on. But then the next day, instead of being hungover like the rest of us, he would go out and climb 13 trad, at 11 o'clock in the morning. And every day it blew us away. Like every week this would happen.
Right.
And I remember one day asking him, I was like, dude, how do you do that? All of us are trashed. And he's just like up in the morning, on point, climbing very heady routes. And he's like, I drink one tall glass of water every morning.
That was the secret.
That was the trick. I was like, I don't know if that adds up, but I mean, genetically, I think he just had a gift to either process or just, maybe athletically talented. But that was the joke that we kind of carried on for many years. And
that was literally the difference maker, because the rest of you guys weren't even doing that. You weren't even having it sounds like any water. You were hydrating on beer at night and then waking up and getting out climbing. And the difference maker was this one guy had a little bit of water and he was all of a sudden like way more recovered than the rest of you. That's
totally.
Great.
We'd go from drinks to coffee to Craig, and he would go drinks to water to coffee to Craig. And I think
that was it.
That made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, that made all the difference. That's great, dude.
Yeah. So drink your water, people.
Let's talk about tactics for a little bit here. We touched a little bit on skin, and we can talk more about that. I haven't climbed in Squamish yet, but I've climbed in the Sierras, and I've been out to Leavenworth, and I've climbed there. And I'm actually going to be out in Squamish in August. I'm really excited. First trip out, so I'll have to pick your brain on that as well. But beyond skin, I want to hear about tactics, especially as it pertains to granite climbing, which just remains such a mystery to me, even though I've spent quite a bit of time on it. But we can widen that as well. And I'm curious tactically, like if anything's been a struggle, always like to look at struggle first, but then also just things that you've learned along the way and difference makers that might mean sending a super hard project and not. So yeah, let's just peel back on tactics here.
Well, I think my biggest struggle with climbing in general is actually, I think I touched on skin or injuries in the past, but it's also power. Like I am not a powerful athlete. When we were in gym climbing in our teens, everyone was sort of still living at home and going to the gym. There was really strong climbers. Like I look today, there's like board climbers who, are like 17 and they're doing like V14s and V15s on the board.
Yeah.
And I even know I know a guy who, won like a national bouldering championship and then fell on a 510A on granite because he didn't know how to apply his strength yet.
Yeah.
And so just because you're strong or powerful doesn't necessarily mean you're good or technical.
Yeah.
And so I've struggled with power, like whenever, there's a really powerful move or like fast twitch where you have to like jump to an edge and engage full force. There's a delay for me to get to 100%. There's sort of like a 1 to 3 second delay. And, an example is actually Sean McCall. I don't know if you're familiar with a comp climber from Vancouver.
Yeah.
Like he could jump to a hold and within milliseconds have full engagement on that edge. And then just like his body would swing out. But if I can't have those like 1 second to 2 seconds to get full engagement, my fingers would just open and I'd fall off. And so my style of climbing lends itself to like that mid-range, that sort of 100 move, resistance climbing. Like I was always a fairly decent 400, 800 meter runner, but I couldn't have the power in 100 meters to keep up with the stronger, more powerful athletes. So if I had a struggle, I would say that would be my struggle, would be keeping up with power climbs that I want to do. An example of that is actually Dreamcatcher. Like I've always wanted to do that route. Chris and I bolted it together in like 2005. And then I got sidetracked, I got injured, and then I did Cobra Crack in 2006. So that took a little bit of focus, but I've never been powerful enough to make those last few exit moves feel easy. I could do them and I've done them. And then the first half was okay, but the power, it was like near my limit of power. And so that route is kind of like a nemesis route for me because I don't know if I'll ever be powerful enough to put it together. And I also don't think that I've tried. Like I don't think I've systematically applied myself the way we've been talking about most of this conversation specifically for that route. And so I've always dabbled on it, and then I would take like multi-year, then I'd go back and I'd dabble on it, and then I'd take these long breaks. And I think the power component always kind of discouraged me. I was like, I could do it, but it's still just a really hard move. And that would be discouraging. Whereas when I got on like a fitness route and I could do all the moves in a couple of tries, I was like, oh, well, all I got to do is just keep trying until I do it, because it was in my brain, it was almost inevitable. But with Dreamcatcher or something like that, with that much power at the end, I never quite had the switch on where I was like, if I just commit, I know I could do this route. It was like, if I commit, there's still a 50% chance I could do this route. So
right.
So that's sort of my struggle with climbing, is like ultra powerful climbs that I really want to do, but I have to sort of let go of a little bit because I don't know if I'm prepared to do the work, because power takes so much time to develop, right? Or for me, it does. It takes a lot longer to develop than a fitness route would. And so for me to do something like that, I would just have to invest so much systematic training and stay so focused for so much longer. Whereas a fitness route, like that example last year, I mean, I trained for like 4 months and I felt like I had the fitness to put all those moves together. And so for me, that's a big difference. And there's climbs like Action Direct that I would love to go do. And I love pocket climbing, but I don't know if I'm powerful enough to do a 4-bolt 9A that's, historically known to be quite hard. So, that's my struggle. I'm sorry if I went off topic there, but that's...
No, I mean, it's great. We've touched on a lot of things that I would love to unpack on this. And, it's all relative, right? I would say that you're a very powerful climber considering, I mean, look, the moves on Cobra Crack, Just Do It. I think you're quite strong. And I've had both Michaela and Paige on the show here, and we've talked a lot about Dreamcatcher, and there's ways to, I think, flow through that. It seems like, at least in watching the films, to flow through that, whereas somebody like Chris Sharma can power through something. There are ways to probably use technical mastery like you are capable of doing. So let's not write off Dreamcatcher, but let's talk about those things that you highlighted, which is kind of that power, that contact strength, being able to hit something and just really immediately latch down on it. And you've noted that this current route that you're training for isn't as heavy on that. It's more endurance heavy or kind of capacity heavy. But when you are trying to train up your weaknesses, if you will, and you're focusing on that power, what are your go-to training modalities that you like to choose? Because I'm kind of in a similar boat. I think I'm probably majority slower twitch muscle. I like these longer Red River Gorge kind of just paddle for days type things. But as I try to push myself into higher grades, I need to be able to do a boulder problem on a route. And so I'm trying to train this up myself. And I'm just curious what you focus on when you're in that kind of phase in your training.
To be honest, for the last, I'd say year, maybe actually going on, 18, 20 months now, I've really only been focused on capacity stamina climbing.
You monster. Your capacity must be crazy right now.
Well, no, I lost it all last fall and winter. I did ramp it up. I felt really good heading into summer. Summer came, kids went out of school. I fell off the wagon, and then I've had 3 injuries over the winter. We've had the flu, maybe COVID 2 times. Okay. And I'm probably 4 months behind where I was hoping to be this May. And that's frustrating. That's a bit of a struggle, right? So I've lost my spring season to setbacks. And so now I'm actually starting to focus on the fall season, which seems to be rapidly deteriorating based on work schedules and life stuff. I feel like my fall season is like 8 days of climbing. Oh, God. So I'm like, okay, I have to be very specific about those 8 days and how do I maintain or ramp up my fitness for those 8 days next, in 5 months from now. To go on to power though, I mean, I do think board climbing was, I think probably my strongest was when I was board climbing more regularly. At my peak, I think I was happily doing, 3 moonboard sessions a week and was feeling okay. But again, I've never been super powerful. So like a V10 on a moonboard is incredibly hard for me. I have to be,
because it's a V12
on point. Well, yeah. And I've only ever done one V13 in my life. I've never really focused on bouldering. And I love bouldering, but I also love so many other styles of climbing that I could never just boulder for a year. Like if I bouldered for 1 year, that would drive me insane. I could boulder for maybe 6 weeks, and then I would have to go do a big wall, or like I'd have to do something else. I think maybe the longest I've ever only trained or bouldered for was like maybe 6 weeks, and then I went and did routes or went on a trip or something, or got injured and then had to take 3 months off. Right. But board climbing, I think, is massive. As I'm older now, climbing on a moonboard at 40 is feeling aggressive. Also, our holds are getting quite slippery. Like they're 10 years old. So they're so slick. Totally. Yeah, that's a component. But yeah, board climbing, I think, is so good. I think when I was sort of at my peak, it was probably like 3 moon boards a session. Or when I was younger at our home gym, which was a very old gym. I mean, it was built in 1995. They didn't know anything about rock climbing, but there was this shed that have these like curved roofs.
Right.
You know, these like metal sheds and one of those was inside the gym. And so they just attached plywood to the outside of it or to the inside of it and then put mats down. And we just littered that thing with, atrocious holds. And, me and my friends, that's probably the foundation of my strength, to be honest. We spent 2 to 3, maybe even 4 years, 4 winters on that board.
Yeah.
It wasn't a board, it was just a spray wall that, and I think I've lived off of that, the power I generated over those 4 winters on that board, because we had awful footholds, we had small handholds or sloping handholds, and I think today it would be like the equivalent of a moon board or a tension board. But that was in the late 90s. And so that was the foundation of my power. And then I became more technical climber, and I really got into, like you were saying, those like granite, Smith rocks type stuff where footholds become not edges or smears, they're more like smedging. And you have to pull with your toes even on vertical climbs. If you're not stepping with intention on your toe, at the right part of your toe, like it just feels twice as hard. Every move can feel twice as hard. And I kind of started geeking out on that stuff. So I guess I did have a power foundation in my teens, but today that would just be like average, like I was climbing maybe, V11, V12, in the 90s on a board, but today it's like V14s and V15s are normal. So I was probably middle of the pack. It's just a different era.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, the rate at which the sport is progressing, and I think we will talk about this at some point, is pretty wild to see, especially people that are taking indoor tactics and strength and moving it outdoors. But Connor, whom you've brought up and I've had on the show here, is just a great example of someone who is like crazy strong, but also technically incredibly talented and experienced. And so before we shift off of this chapter and move on, I definitely want to talk about, as I'm going to be coming out to Squamish, and I was just recently at Smith. I got a chance to climb with Alan Watts, which was just so epic and joyful. But man, I really struggle on that type of footwork, kind of that constant pressure footwork, probably because I'm a bit lazy. I can be a bit lazy about it here at the Red, where it's sandstone and there's a billion different little ripples and pockets. And so whenever I go out and I hop in the Clear Light Cave with Alex and them, on that limestone, I'm always just skating off of everything. He's like, everything's a foot, just push against it. And I can't. I just don't, like, it does not compute. And then similarly, I started climbing on granite out there and doing multi-pitch, and I feel like a lot of that has atrophied. So, what stands out in terms of trying to train that up if you can't spend a lot of time on the actual rock? Is there a way to train up good footwork?
Well, actually, if you can't spend a lot of time on rock, when I look at my friend network who are really good technical climbers, they've all put in, for the most part, a tremendous amount of volume, right? Like when you look at like somebody like Connor or Alex or Tommy, if you think about how much volume they've put in on that type of climbing, like they're years and years ahead of the average person, only because they've done 10 times more of it every week, every month, every year, and it's just added up. And I was similar in the sense that I was attracted to these big, huge, clean faces. And so whenever I wanted to go sport climbing, I would do these like 100-foot long kind of 5-10 degree technical faces. Like, just do it, at Smith Rock, right? Like that what was that, 1992 maybe it was put up. That to me was like, when you see pictures of that wall, a lot of climbers are drawn to it. They're like, that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And so at that time, there was a lot of those routes. The VRG had a lot of those technical, longer 513, 514 routes. And so I did a ton of them. Like I don't keep track, but I've done so much technical climbing that I think my base is just, I wouldn't say it's naturally higher, but I've built it up higher than the average climber. And I think when you look at Connor and those kinds of climbers, I think you would agree that they've put in so much time. So how do you do that off the rock? You have to force yourself to do it. I think you have to force yourself to go into the gym and climb and seek out those type of routes, right? I don't think there's any other way other than recreating the goal of, I want to be better at this do this.
Yeah.
It's, it's so simple sometimes.
And find a route with like the worst foot chips, or maybe don't even use maybe just try to use bolt holes or something like that. I'm not sure, because typically routes at gyms have so many jugs that you can just stand on. You can almost get away with pretty bad footwork, and then a lot of the setting is focused on what are you holding with your hands. So I find it challenging for me to work on that. Maybe a steep board, like a 40-degree spray wall, like you're talking about, that you trained on, or that kind of shed that you trained on, where there's some grimy, nasty, little heinous foot chips, like just kind of working on those, I guess.
Yeah, but that angle just changes the whole nature of what you're trying to accomplish.
That's
right?
True. Yeah.
I think if someone wants to get more technically better, my advice right now, it might change, but my advice would be to get on harder routes in the gym. Even not to do them, but just to improve. So I was on a 512, I think it was like 12D in Utah recently at a gym, and I couldn't believe how technical it felt. Like, it was really technical. And so I was actually impressed, because it almost felt like a 90s, early 2000 setting style. It didn't feel like a modern gym route where the footholds are bigger, but the movement is weird. This felt very much like an outdoor route. So my advice would be, if you're a 5'11" climber, to get on like 11D, 12A, 12B routes, not to successfully send them, but to increase your capacity to stand on worse and worse footholds. And I think that's actually where I see a lot, when I do a bit of coaching, and what I see a lot of is people being like, well, I'm not going to try this thing unless there's a good chance I'm going to do it. Or they'll warm up on a route and they're like, I have to get to the top on my warm up. And I'm like, no, it is your warm up. Nothing matters about your warm up. Rest 5 times so you don't get flash pumped. Like, I think sometimes maybe ego gets involved, and I'm like, just throw all that shit out the window. Like, get on a 512D, go bolt to bolt, because it's best representation of outdoor climbing because of the way it's set on a technical route. So I hope that helps. That's my insight.
Quick shout out to our friends over at Scarpa, who have been sporting the struggle here for a long time now. And then me as a climber, I've been climbing in Scarpas for over a decade. My very first pair of climbing and approach shoes were Scarpa, and I love them so much. And I want to tell you about 2 new shoes that they just came out with. First, the Instinct VSR LV. You've probably seen Nathaniel Coleman and Alex Puccio talking about these. I posted a picture when I got mine. They're purple and black and white, so already winning. But what's the LV stand for? Low volume fit. So if you've got a narrower foot, or you like a really technical feel to your toe box and your heel, the low volume is probably the shoe for you. It's also got this extra patch of toe rubber on the front with an aggressive texture, and extra structure in the heel for excellent heel hooking ability. This shoe's super technical. It's really beautiful, and it's got that extra sticky VSR rubber on it. And then this new hiking and approach shoe that they just came out with, the Rapid, are so good. The LT's the lightweight version with recycled content and a knit upper, and then the XT is the extremely abrasion resistant version for the harshest alpine conditions. It's got a suede upper, also recycled content, and they both implement the active fit and active impact technology in those. You guys, Scarpa's been sustainably making the best adventure footwear since 1938, and they support me over here at The Struggle. Show them some love over at scarpa.com. That link is right there in your show notes. This episode is supported by Rungni. Y'all know Rungni. It's Magnus Mitbo's company. Oh my gosh, they make incredible stuff, you guys, okay? Chalk, apparel, accessories, chalk bags, chalk buckets. It's all there over on their website. What are my favorites? Okay, well, right now I'm using their liquid chalk every time I go out and have a session. It's called Mag Juice, first of all. So boom, you've already got my money. But then, it works really, really well. I rub it on my palms, my fingers, and it's like my base layer. I don't then have to chalk up as much when I'm climbing, whether it's a gym session or out at the crag. Less time chalking up means more time actually climbing and hopefully landing moves and not punting off my project. And then the apparel's fantastic. My absolute favorite, I think you guys know this, are their harness pants. They are stretchy, they are durable, they are attractive. I love the cut, I love the feel. They are the best dang pants in the game. And right now, you can get 10% off pretty much everything over at Rungni by using code STRUGGLE. This dovetails well into the mental game chapter, my favorite chapter here of the struggle format. And I want to talk about trying hard. I want to talk about failure. I want to talk about fear. A lot of things that you seem to manage really well. I mean, you have quite the reputation and the track record for very bold climbing. And I'm curious, as we peel back on that, and we'll start to look at maybe some specific examples as well. Has that always come easy for you, or has fear, maybe fear of falling in this kind of thing, or fear of injury on these bold climbs that you've done, was that a struggle initially?
I'm trying to remember if I've struggled with it.
You haven't been afraid in so long, you don't even remember if you ever were.
Oh, I've been afraid. I've definitely been afraid. There's a few distinct memories of being afraid, and they were like, one was on like an 11D, I think, in El Dorado Canyon. I can't remember the name of it now. It was so long ago, but I was warming up on it because all the other routes were occupied. And I was like, this thing's 511 in the book, but it was also 511 like RX rated, and I didn't pay much attention to that. And it was stupid of me. Like, in retrospect, it was like I got myself into some trouble because I was putting in mediocre gear thinking that better gear would come.
Right.
And it just never came. And then all of a sudden I'm like at the crux, couldn't down climb over this little roof because I couldn't see my foothold. And I had gear that I didn't trust, that I didn't think was going to hold me from hitting the ground. And there was no way out. I tried to go left and right to get off the route to escape, and I couldn't down climb. And then I'm over gripping, I'm terrified, and I had to go up. And I did the crux, but it was very marginal. Like, it was very marginal. So that was a terrifying moment, and a good reality check to not be so optimistic that
right. If a route is rated R or X, maybe.
Yeah, that's where I kind of got into trouble there. I've also been pretty terrified on a free solo that was a 10C, and I've backed off everything. I've backed off a 5.7 free solo before because it felt insecure. So I have struggled with it. I'm certainly probably middle of the pack when it comes to. I just like calculated risk for the most part. Like, people seeing some of the routes and they're like, well, it can be managed for the most part. If you approach it with the right mindset and the right analytics, you can manage the risk quite well, in my opinion. Where I've gotten into trouble is when a lot of free soloing stuff where, I could either do one move to easier climbing, or I could do like reverse 100 moves back to the ground. And you're like, okay, do I just commit to this one move that I wasn't 100%. I was like 98% sure that I was going to do it, but I wasn't 100. And I chose to down climb all the way back to the ground. I was like super pumped because I was quite high up the route. So moments like that where you kind of find yourself at this crossroad, sometimes unexpectedly. And those are the moments that terrify me the most. The calculated moments, I would say, are far less scary because I've already done the math for the most part in my head.
Right.
And I've prepared myself for it. So when I get to the kind of point of no return, I know how long I'm in that zone for. But when it happens unexpectedly because you didn't prepare in any way, shape, or form, that's when it's the most dangerous, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
that's an interesting distinction on like the free soloing there, where you hit like a move where, I mean, if you had a rope on, you wouldn't have thought twice. It sounds like 98% you're making that move, but when the consequence is so high, you chose to down climb, which has its own risk as well. But essentially, you were making that calculation in the moment. And that brings to mind someone that you've spent a lot of time with, which is Alex Honnold. And I'm curious if you've noticed, like, is there a difference in calculation that's made? Like, do you feel like he's 100% on everything, or he just has a higher tolerance for 98%, whereas you, 98% just isn't high enough. It needs to be 100.
That's a really good question. I don't have the answer to that. I think it's a little bit of both. I know for a fact that his tolerance for risk is just far higher than I will ever have. Like, I'm happy to walk away from things, very happy, even though they're not even at that upper, limit. And he just has a higher capacity to deal with it. So it might be a combination of more volume. He's climbed so much in his life.
Right.
Even when he was young, like, he climbed a lot. And, even though I've climbed a lot, he probably has more volume, especially at this point. I think I'm referring to years past. But, I mean, for sure to this point, when you look at all the stuff, the volume climbing that he's done, I mean, it is astronomical. And so I think it's a combination of both. He obviously has a natural tendency to embrace risk more than the average person, far more than me. And I also think his volume is higher. So I think the two things have closed the gap where, he's free soloed routes that I've wanted to free solo. In fact, actually I wrote about it briefly in the book, where there's this amazing, 8-pitch route in Squamish. It's like 11B, and it's an iconic route. It's amazing. And I've always wanted to free solo it. And at the time, no one had done it. And then he came along one summer and went on a rampage and ticked that route. And I was like, oh, thank God. Now I don't have to do it.
Right. You're off the hook.
Yeah. I didn't even want to do it after that. I was like, oh man, I'm so glad somebody did it. And because I thought about it for like 2 years about whether or not I should. And I think I realized even after the first year that I wasn't willing to. I was really glad that he did it.
I'm curious on the experience for you of free soloing compared to climbing. As somebody, I haven't done any free soloing myself, and I don't think I have the temperament for it. Although, I scramble. And so some people from the outside, it may be like, oh, it's all just like such a matter of perspective. But, what's the experience for you like when you're out free soloing compared to, doing roped climbs?
Well, every climb is a different experience. Every decade of my life has been a different experience. When I was in my mid-20s and trying to explore my limit of free soloing, my comfort limit, it was unbelievable. Very much like a drug, actually. Like, very memorable, very deeply like satisfying. But again, the risk versus the reward became less and less as I got a little bit older, as I got into a really serious relationship. I was like,
Sure.
Time with her is so much better. Like, the drug I got from my relationship was better than the drug I got from free soloing. And so that just slowly kind of went away. And I still free solo to this day. I just don't have the desire to be so out there as I once did.
Yeah.
I wanted to feel where I could be at 100% confident in doing that move. Like we were kind of talked about, I was 98, 99% sure, but I was like 99.99% sure I could down climb. So that's what it came down to, is like, I knew I could down climb more likely than do this move. Even if it was a fraction of a percentage, I knew there was a better chance. And so I opted for that one. And by the time I got to the ground, I was so pumped. It was like the deepest. I didn't intend to down climb it, so I wasn't as prepared, but I knew that I could tap into it. When I was pushing free soloing, it was just such a liberating and free experience. And I still crave that, but just on much lower route, like, 10A, 10B, once in a while I'll free solo 10C, maybe a 10D. I've got wired, but it's mostly 5.8, 5.9 to 10B range. And maybe one day that'll shrink and maybe go away completely, but I still like it to some degree, And then I guess a little bit of thought on like earlier stage, taking risk. When we were gym climbing in our early years, we had a key to the gym. A couple of us were employees of the gym, and when it closed, we would take these like monster falls because we were teenagers, and we'd like set up like the gymnastics mat underneath, and we would try to see how close to the ground we could get. So we'd have like, we knew exactly like how many arm lengths of rope. We'd measure it out, and then we'd like skim the ground and pick our feet up to like, and so we did this so much that like I was taking like 35-foot falls in the gym, and I think that translated outside because I knew what to expect. Like when you fall outside, if you don't fall regularly and you don't take big falls, it's terrifying, the thought of taking a fall outside. But when you'd practice indoors a lot, I knew the trajectory my body would take. And I like, even when you're off, like, if you're off by 5 degrees from your last piece, like, that you're not going to fall in this weird, physically impossible way and hit a ledge. You're going to fall down and then over, right? So you start to learn trajectory. And that was a big learning curve for me. So when it came to pushing like harder trad climbs and bigger runouts, I had confidence because I'd experienced it. And then I also had a foundation of strength that I had built up for years. And so I had both confidence in my strength, my ability, and confidence in my ability to fall well.
I like that. It's the lived experience, the sense memory, and just the confidence that comes from that to remove as many unknowns as possible, whether you're free soloing or you're taking a big fall or you're climbing above a marginal piece. Just logging those hours, I think, makes a huge difference. And it did for me when I started falling a lot more here at the Red than I was used to because I was always climbing on gear out west. And so I really had to learn how to fall and like how to be comfortable with falling. So yeah, I appreciate the perspective, man. I'm curious, say you climb quite a bit with your kids. It looks like you get out once a week. I mean, I'm not sure how much outside that is. I've seen photos of you all out climbing, but I'm imagining a lot of it's at the gym. But as you're working with them and you're seeing them go through this, and maybe in situations that wouldn't make you nervous if you were climbing, but now you're seeing your kids in these situations. Has that changed your perspective on the risk of climbing at all, or, how you want them to be as climbers as they get a little bit older and more bold? Or is it all top rope right now? It's all top rope for my kids right now.
Yeah, no, it's mostly top rope. He's done some very easy low angle stuff. So, one thing I'll say is that the lower angle, even if it's hard, he's more comfortable on a lower angle than easier climbing that's inverted. So like a 5'9" with knobs that's upside down, like a little inverted. He's so tall and kind of lanky that it's intimidating for him to lean back. And so on a lower angle, it could be a harder climb, but he's more comfortable with that terrain, that angle of terrain.
Yeah.
And he's 11. He's actually quite a timid person right now, which has been great for us as parents because he's only broken one leg skiing, and we have quite a few friends with kids who have like so many broken bones at this stage. From like they grow up in like Squamish, Whistler, mountain biking, skiing,
right?
I mean, hucking, huge things. He's quite timid, and so he's the last guy to hit the jump as opposed to the first kid. And that's been a blessing in a lot of ways because he's very cautious. And to be honest, I think it's similar to my upbringing. I think I liked adventure, but I was I tried to be cautious. But it gets hard when you spend thousands of days out doing the thing, right? Like accidents can still happen. And so what do I want to tell my kids? They're on their own journey. I'm noticing that no amount of like coaching from Lydia and I are effective at this point, like very little. Maybe they're absorbing it a little bit, but they want to do it on their own. They want to figure it out on their own. They want to get lowered when they want to get lowered. Like maybe you're experiencing this, but they're on their own journey, and we can help facilitate it, but they're not letting us push them past their own comfort zone, which I appreciate.
Thank you for sharing. We had actually some questions about kind of parenting and coaching kids that I'm also interested in getting your answers on. So we'll get to that in just a minute here. But I want to talk about the book for a little bit here because we've just, in this hour that we've been chatting, or hour and a half here, you've covered decades of experience and your travels and being a dirtbag and climbing at the cutting edge, putting up the hardest trad climb in the world at its time with Cobra Crack, and now moving into this phase where you're a dad, but you're also projecting 15A. And it's just like, it's so interesting. And so I'm curious, your book just hit shelves. It came out on 5/14. Love it. Great publication date. It's called Uplifted. So tell me about Uplifted.
Well, Uplifted is a short collection of stories about my climbing journey, I suppose, and the friends and people that have made it such a wonderful journey, and the places that I have frequented and like to go, and how I have changed over years, as well as the sport itself. I worked with the Patagonia team, and I worked with a pretty good bunch of really good editors, and they felt that it was just reasonable to go back and tell my story, because now that I'm raising kids with my wife, they wanted me to reflect a little bit. They're like, well, how has your upbringing affected the way you want to raise kids? And so there are, we did revisit this sort of full circle. So it actually goes back to like 3 years old, very briefly, about growing up on a farm, and, these very vivid memories I have of growing up on 100 acres of freedom and adventure. And then quickly going into how I discovered climbing at 15 and what climbing was like in the 90s a little bit. And then there's just these people, and I wish I could have covered everybody, because I have so many friends and from our network who all had an influence on me, but I could really only touch on a few at a time, and these little sort of pivotal moments that are sort of memorable moments, and they're not always climbing moments. They're certainly not climbing achievement moments. Until later in my career did I touch on that in the book. So it's this evolution, I suppose, of my climbing journey, but the word uplifted, it really just came from when I thought about the people that have inspired me, the photography, the stories. It's this real community of people that are willing to share their adventures and stories that really helped shape my own life, because I don't know if I would have just picked up and gone to Colorado at 17 years old had I not read about these places that, seem just so wild and cool. And so I'm grateful for it all. And I think that's where it came from.
I love that. I really love the format of this book because for me, at least, being a fellow busy dad, climber, having jobs and all this stuff, it can be challenging for me to tuck into like a really long form, memoir, but short stories I can, dip into at night when I've got 15 minutes before my head hits the pillow, or when I've just got a little bit of time between meetings. And the photography in there is beautiful as well. Is this all been content that's been collected over the years through your work with Patagonia, or did you reach out to friends to find some of this old like archival, shots from all of your adventures back in the day?
Yeah, some of these images were just like old printed, 4x6, matte glossy images that are just scratched up and put in a shoebox for 20 years and just trying to pull them back out. And yeah, we did touch base with a few older friends to see if they had anything from that era. But man, it turns out we didn't actually take a lot of pictures.
Right. You're too busy climbing.
Totally. Yeah. Too busy climbing. Nobody had iPhones. So yeah, but there's enough there for sure that are fun. Like I think the black and white is actually my very first rock climb ever, like where I touched rock for the first day.
Cool.
And it's a buddy of mine named Rob Quilty who took that image. I'm grateful for the photos that did make it in there. And, I think the other ones, there's also some higher level sort of professional photography from, my days on El Cap, early days on various climbs. So yeah, there's a collection of different photographers in there that have contributed. And I'm actually really glad that they put some images in there, because I don't consider myself a very good writer. I think I can get by, and I think I could tell a story, but I think the images really help add context to the stories. There are people who can write without needing any support, but I feel like the images add a lot of context. So yeah, thanks for that compliment.
Totally, man. It's really beautiful. It's just a beautiful book. And I find that Patagonia puts out fantastic books. I always pick up everything that they put out. I pick up because it's just like, it looks good. It feels good. And I like having it on my table, next to the bed or on the coffee table. When you went through this process, and I mean, you're reflecting on decades of adventures, does one of these short stories that's in the book stand out that you could tell us a little bit about right here, so we can get a little sample of what's in there?
Well, I think there's actually 5 extremely pivotal moments in my life, and maybe we can all resonate with this. But like the first one was discovering climbing. That was huge. Like I was on this one path, and then I found climbing, and everything changed.
And at the time, it was outdoor climbing that you discovered, or was it like you popped by a gym? What is the story of that when you were 15 years old?
Yeah, well, the first exposure was on TV. ESPN had like a World Cup they were highlighting. Yeah. And I was like, just getting home from a hockey game, like sweaty and, wearing long underwear. And I turned on the TV and I watched this event, and I was like, what the heck is this? Like, it just sucked me right in. And it wasn't the fast moving motocross, sports that I was accustomed to. It was these slow moving figures on this crazy looking wall with this tiny little rope, and it just sucked me in. And I was so lucky enough to be near a gym in Toronto. And then
was this just so I understand the era? Was this back when like Lynn Hill was doing these, and Hans Florine was, like this was like the early days of like those rock game type competitions?
Absolutely. Like looking back, that would have probably been Lynn Hill and Robin Erbisfield I was watching on TV.
Cool.
And it would have been like François Legrand and Yuji Hariyama.
Yeah.
It would have been those, top podium players for sure.
Legends.
Yeah. And they were like, they're all wearing tights and tank tops, and
totally.
I was just like, I was just so fascinated. I was like, they were just twisting and turning, and they were methodically problem solving. And then in those days, like you couldn't there was no internet in 95 for me anyway. I didn't have a computer. I couldn't just Google rock climbing. I literally would come home every Saturday and put on ESPN and try to watch more. And it never happened. I never saw climbing on ESPN again after that.
Right.
But then a climbing gym did open up near me. And I mean, I think we were like the 5th climbing gym in Canada. So I was really lucky to find something I connected so deeply with at such an early age, and now there's like 130, 140 gyms in Canada, 600 and whatever, 650 in the US. I mean, it's exploded, and I think everybody's exposed to it now. But back then it was very uncommon, and it felt like, I think I might write about it a little bit, but it's almost felt like this undercover, like, fight club type of thing where, you go down to the gym and there's like 20 regulars, and it was just a really awesome time. And it was hard to talk about it to family and friends who didn't know what it was. So that was hugely pivotal. And then the next sort of real shift in my climbing was after, when I climbed Cobra Crack. I was really shy, sort of media reluctant, and Cobra Crack really forced me to be more comfortable representing myself as a climber and an athlete. And I was already on the Patagonia team at that point, still early stages, but that was a pretty pivotal moment. And then not long after that, my wife and I moved in together, and we built a life together around that. And she's another pivotal, very memorable inflection point where I changed the way I approached climbing and life to nurture a relationship. And I'd say kids have been another, incredibly important pivot in my life. So at the end of the book, after, my climbing journey gets a little bit more technical, I fear that I'm going to lose some, readers where the climbing gets kind of historical and technical, and I talk about modern day climbing on El Cap and things like that. And then I do kind of bring it back at the end towards the trailer life with kids, what that's like living this committed climbing life and raising these little bundles that you just try to wrap up and bring with you as much as you can. And there's so many climbers now going through this. I'm loving social media right now with so many professional climbing moms sharing their journey. Yeah. It's been really cool. And then I kind of summarize things towards the end in the final chapter. So to this point in my life, it is a full circle, and it seemed like a really opportune time to, try to put them into a collection. But I am a little bit insecure in the sense that I will never be able to tell all the stories or include all the important people. I actually had a sort of a thought the other day of like, it kind of felt like planning a wedding where you feel like you want to make everyone a part of it, and it's just not possible. And so I don't know if this book will ever feel finished in it to me, but I hope that it does to the reader, even if they're just reading one chapter at a time and not even in order. It doesn't have to be read in order. It could just be a snapshot in time.
Yeah, it's a really cool format. I really like that. And oftentimes when we reflect and try to collect thoughts and memories and experience in a way that you did for Uplifted, it has this effect on bringing into a little bit sharper focus where we think we want to go from here. And we've talked a little bit about your climbing goals in the immediate term, this 15A that you're working on. And of course, you dispatched 14D or 9A just fairly recently with Spirit Quest. And The Gentleman's Race says there's a great film on your YouTube channel that documents that. So I recommend everybody to go check out. So you're climbing really hard right now. We talked a bit about that, but did working on this book and this collection of stories give you any insights on where you think you might want to go as a person over the next 10, 20, 30 years?
I just want to keep climbing. I want to stay healthy. When people ask what my goal is right now, like, yes, I have a list of dream climbs, but my number one goal is to stay healthy. Like, if I'm going to do anything that compromises my health at this stage, I'm just not going to do it. I'm the first one to walk away from something that I think is going to injure me or slow me down as a dad or a partner for that matter. If I can't do, the tasks and heavy lifting that needs to be done around the house to raise my kids the way I want to, it's going to be frustrating for me. So health is number one, and that's not just for me, but it's also for my family. And then number two are my climbing goals. Actually, number two is kind of split in half. I mean, it's, I have to continue to provide for the family. And so I need to creatively find ways as a self-employed person to continuously, keep the income trickling in. And if that's through coaching, guiding, photography, writing, whatever that may be, from year to year, it changes a little bit. So yeah. And then actually, I would say climbing is actually my third most important thing in life. So yeah, family, health, income, and then climbing is sort of. And if I really had to break down family, I mean, it would each relationship gets broken down. So climbing is probably like 7th on the list right now, to be honest. And it didn't used to be like that. So that's been a shift. And I'd say a goal would be when our kids are a little bit older. I think my wife and I both want to be healthy enough and strong enough that we can go out like Eric and get back on the road and go to the places that we miss, places that we didn't have a chance to go to because life felt so busy, and still feel strong, still feel healthy, still feel like we can climb, 2 days in a row near our limit and recover. So I think, if I had a goal for 10 years from now, I really want to be strong enough to plan and go on fun trips with my wife and friends and climb at or near my limit.
That's just great, man. It's so relatable. I mean, I'm just so in it. And I think a lot of people who are listening right now are just so in it, where we're psyched on climbing.
Yeah.
It's our outlet. We want to get better, and it gives us that. Maybe it's the last thing we think about when the head hits the pillow, because we're running those moves on the route, on the proj, and the first thing when we wake up. But then there's about 15 hours of other things we need to do during the day that isn't climbing, and we're just trying to fit it in. And it's really refreshing in a way to talk to a professional climber and someone who's elite and has pushed the sport forward in the many ways that you have, where you're just kind of like on that same struggle bus with the rest of us, trying to fit it all in.
Yeah. I think sometimes maybe a misconception is that, when you are a climber who's visible in the world a little bit, or, had maybe done some notable things in the past, that you can just live off of climbing. And it's not really the case. It's a part of what you do, but it's everything that you do outside of the act of climbing that contributes to making a living out of it. Like it's things like, like your podcast, like it's a lot of work, and it's mostly fun work. And thankfully it's fun work, and it comes easily because we're so interested in it. But yeah, I do feel that I relate to pretty much everyone I know who has a job and, trying to pay a mortgage and raising kids and staying healthy and, dating your wife and all sorts of stuff. I think the way that I try to look at life in general is that everything is an adventure. And so even if I can't climb a route one season, I'm like, oh, well, that just means I get to train for it next year, and that's an adventure. Or, I lose one source of income, but then that's an adventure in seeking out another source of income. It's like a framework that I try to use in life, is like something that happens to us, whether it's luck or, unluck, it doesn't necessarily need to be a negative. It could be reframed as a new opportunity for something else. And I try to do that as much as I can, and I hope I can continue doing that going forward.
All right, y'all, that wraps things up with the very thoughtful and so cool Sonnie Trotter. Please pick up his book, Uplifted. It is so, so good. It is going to get you psyched, not just on climbing, but just like on life, on like embracing the days that we have. So check out Uplifted. I'll put a link in the show notes there. And if you want more insights from Sonnie, and I know you do, we got a great, great bonus episode here for Patreon members and Apple subscribers. And let me tell you what we covered here. He answers listener questions, and we hit topics that include workouts that take 30 minutes or less, for us busy climbers out there, what it takes to improve consistently and incrementally year after year, his thoughts on V18 and 516. Spoiler alert, he thinks they're very, very near, and he goes into why he feels that. The effect of comp climbing on rock climbing. We talk about Hamish MacArthur and Brooke Rabitou and, some of the comp climbers that have been out dominating on rock. And, this is a fun little one. He shares a new exercise that he's been doing that he just recently learned that takes only 60 seconds, but it sounds super brutal. You can get instant access to all of that right now at zero cost, actually, with a free trial over at patreon.com/thestruggleclimbing-show, or right there in your Apple Podcast player if you are an iPhone person. And you're also going to get instant access to more than 100 hours of other bonus content featuring the best of the best. I'm talking about Adam Ondra, Chris Sharma, Nina Williams, Alex Honnold, Magnus Mitbo, and so many more athletes and coaches that have been on the show here. Plus, pro clinics on stronger fingers with Dr. Tyler Nelson, advanced bouldering with Allison Vest, moonboard with Ravioli Biceps, performance hacks with Hazel Finley, and so many more. It's all there for just a few bucks a month, or actually zero cost right now with that free trial, so you can try it before you buy it. Although, honestly, your support as patrons and subscribers is really what helps to keep this thing going. So if you got a few bucks, I certainly would appreciate your help as I'm jamming away here in the podcast/utility closet. Thank you. I love you. Hey, did you know that The Struggle is carbon neutral in partnership with the Honnold Foundation? Well, you do now, and it feels pretty good for me to write that check every month. They're doing such amazing work to bring clean energy to communities around the world. Y'all can get inspired and learn more about their amazing work over at honnoldfoundation.org, and toss them some love if you can. They're doing awesome stuff. And lastly, The Struggle is a proud member of the Plugtone Audio Collective, a diverse group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. The show is produced and hosted by me, Ryan Devlin, and edited by the wonderful Glenn Walker. All right, that clips the anchors on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting the show. If you want to do something that helps me out for zero cost, you could rate and review the show wherever you listen, or just share this with one of your climbing friends or the gym that you climb at. It really helps to get the word out there. I appreciate it. I hope your training and climbing are going great, and if you are struggling like me, well, just remember the struggle makes us stronger.